We are live. Hello, Chad. How are you?
Good. A little smoky, but other than that, fine.
Yeah, this is pretty crazy up there. I heard one of our coworkers said that there was a redwood that either fell on her house or on her neighbor's house over the weekend from the
Yeah,
storms.
that's not good. Those are not small.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, wait a minute, a redwood? That's crazy. But anyways, well, good. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Chad's gonna present and talk a lot about Awesome Compose. So I'll just kick it over to him and take it away, sir.
I think we've talked about Awesome Compose a lot, and what I thought fun today would be to take an example of an Awesome Compose, in this case a Flask app, and make it more awesome. And so we're gonna do some optimizations for it to do some faster inner loop development, and then we're also going to do some multi-stage build optimizations to make the build a little cooler, and we're going to add some unit tests, and we're just going to do this on the fly. So I have a couple of the unit tests pre-written, so it won't take that long to do that part, but the rest of it we're just going to do together, and we'll see. So if you've got questions, just let us know. So let me switch over to a terminal. So we're gonna start with let's see. We're gonna start with this Flask app. So actually, let's start with Awesome Compose. So for folks who are new, Compose is a repository that we have on GitHub that has a number of Compose examples for all kinds of different applications, ranging from fun things like Minecraft through Git, which is like I guess it's actually a GitLab clone, which is a clone of GitHub, but it's a Git server that you can run in your own environment, and a bunch of other things. And these are best practice sort of examples. The one that we're going to look at today is this super simple Flask app. It's just a single file Python Flask. It's got a very simple compose, and it's pretty easy to use. And what we're going to do, though, is start to build upon this to show like the next level of, so you've got a basic compose or a basic Docker file. What can you do from here? All right, so let's get started. Oh, we got some echo.
Yeah, put my headphones on, so I totally forgot about that earlier. Hopefully that'll clear it up.
Cool. All right, do you hear echoing now, folks? Chat.
Okay, cool.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Blake. So let's look at this compose, or actually, let's just look at the app. It is very simple. It just prints hello world. So it's a straightforward Flask app, and what we want to do is make this whole if this was a real developer project, how could we make this better? So let's go through the flow of making a change right now. So I'm going to do Docker compose build, and it's going to build it. And I'll do Docker compose up. And now it's running on port 5000. So we'll go over here, we'll go to localhost 5000, and it's hello world. So let's bump that up a bit.
Boom.
Well, okay, so that looks great. That was pretty easy. Let's make a change, and let's go back to the CLI, this. We'll make a change. So we'll do go over YouTube. And now we'll do build. Up. And we will go here and we will load it. And that wasn't terrible, but we did have a little bit of friction in that flow because we had to stop. We stopped the application, so we had to basically compose down, do another compose build, build the latest container, and then do another compose up. And wouldn't it be cool if we didn't have to do that? So Flask app, an automatic reload feature that you can use. If the code changes, it'll reload the code. But how do you make that work with this setup? And so I think that's an interesting way to start. So let's go do that. We will build this out. The way that you do that is you pass an environment variable, which looks like Flask env equals development. And when the app starts, it will start it up in a reload mode. So we could just go into the compose file, and we could say, okay, when you run this, I want you to do environment, and I want you to say Flask in equals development. And so now if we go back and do Docker compose up, you'll notice that this is going to be it says debug is off. And so we're going to do Docker compose up. And you'll see that debug mode is now on. And so all we did was pass an environment variable. But the container, I guess we could change the code. So what we could do, I suppose, is we could bigger, not smaller. We could Docker exec into the Flask web. We could do shell. And now in here, we could go to the code directory. Or actually, I guess we're already there. We could change this back. And we come back here, we should see that the detected change and app reloaded. And so we could basically just sit in an exec shell and we could develop that way. That's also not super great. That's not the world's easiest way to do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to have I'm going to make a copy of the Docker compose file. Compose compose dev YAML, and I'm going to go here. I'm going to keep this environment, and I'm going to add a volume. So I'm going to add volume for print the current working directory. Let's see. Let me remember where I am. So before I'll finish this, the working directory is Flask, but I actually want to get the app. So I look at the app Docker file. I think the way it works is that we copy just the code into /app. So the way I want this to work for the compose dev is I want the working directory /app to get mounted into /app. That should do it. So now if I actually up here, version 3 of the spec is ancient. We're actually working on getting rid of versions and making it much smarter so that you don't have to have all these versions, but version 3 is really, really old.
Yeah. That's one of the features I'm really excited about. I know that sounds like, yeah, you work at Docker, Peter, whatever, you're just touting it. No, really, that's going to make things so much easier.
Yeah, because it's the Compose spec has evolved quite a lot over the years, and which little pieces are in which version gets a little bit confusing. So making it just so that there is a Compose spec and Compose the tool can figure out what to do, and then warn the user or tell the user it doesn't know what to do, so that the user can change and fix, then that's going to be a better experience. When we Docker Compose, we can tell it a file. We're going to say the dev YAML, and we could say, and what this will do, let's see. Oh, yep. I didn't use the Q tool. Let's see, so. Volumes. So you'll see that it came up. The environment that mode is on, and restarting is available. So I'm going to come to the same directory. Source awesome compose Flask, and I will look at the app in here. YouTube. Let's get this up here so we can see what's going on. There we go. Let's reload this. All right, so it's still YouTube. So I am on my lap or my WSL2 here. I'm not inside the container, and I'm going to edit this app. All right. So, hello world. If we go to here, hopefully, well, where did it go? There we go. So it's automatically mounting this directory into the container, and now I can do all the changes I want. There is a really cool way to do this, which involves code, VS Code. So I'll go ahead and show this because I think it's pretty neat. So we will go to my desktop, and I will grab VS Code.
While you're doing that, Chad, we'll have to tweak the noise canceling just a tiny bit more. It's working great, but sometimes when you're typing it, your voice goes down a little bit lower. But it sounds good. We'll
dial that back.
We're getting there.
I'll actually I can do two things. I can bring the mic closer, and I can talk louder. So that'll be an easy one. I'm a pretty loud person to begin with. So,
cool. Sorry,
let me bring this across.
Threw off your flow there.
Oh, no problem. We're all just figuring this stuff out. So here is VS Code.
Can you bump up your VS Code a bunch? Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
So you'll see that this is in the Flask directory in WSL2, which just happens to be the Ubuntu. I run Ubuntu in my WSL2, so I'm in WSL2, and this is going to get really meta because I'm running Windows 10, and then I'm running Linux inside of that, and I'm running Docker inside of WSL2 and I'm about to step into the container. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to go to the Remote Explorer and I'm going to use the container. So this is the remote container functionality. And I've got a bunch of things open right now, but this is the one that I care about. And this is that Flask container. And I'm going to say attach to this container in a new window. So it's going to start some VS Code magic, and it drops me into a terminal. So if I do, this is inside of the container. So there's a bunch of stuff running, but if I go look, there's the Python app that's actually being run. So I'm inside the container, inside of WSL2, running in Windows 10.
And it's cool.
And I can open.
Sorry, Chad. Scroll back up. Show that, not to get too deep into it, but you'll see that the Python's running on PID 1. Right?
Yeah, that's
Just
right.
like you would expect for a container.
So let me open this thing. So, right, this is PID 1. It's a container. And so I've got my IDE running inside the container, and now I'm going to open the app directory. So inside the container, which is the Flask container, this is what's in there. In this case, there's an app, there's the Docker file, which isn't really needed for the inside of the container. But I can go here and let's just change this to something completely different so folks know that there's no magic up our sleeve. So we'll do that. And because I'm in the container, it automatically gets reflected back in. So if I go to my Chrome, wherever that is, there it is, and reload it, it's in there. So I can use my everyday IDE and all of the tools with that around. And Blake, it is part of the Docker extension. So the way that I got that was I went to extensions, I typed in Docker, and I've got the Docker extension. So the one thing about VS Code that's a little bit weird is that you can have your extensions installed especially in the remote places, in different pieces. So you can have the extension in your WSL2, or in this case, it's going to say, hey, do you want to install an extension in the container? So, there's some intricacies of like VS Code extensions, but for the most part, you might need to install like Python, for example. I don't think I have the Python extensions I have them globally, but I don't. If you don't have them, you might have to install them for this, and you can install them inside of the container so that it keeps your WSL2 outside of the container clean. So if you're just looking at it, you can just do that. So now that we have that working, we have a quick and easy iterative loop. So I can just we can just keep changing, saving, and iterating, and that's all just much faster, right? So didn't have to stop compose, didn't have to do anything. The cost of this is that I created 2 compose files, and there's ways that we're looking to make that different. So compose has some ideas around extends and other pieces, but in the beginning, I'm just going to leave it as 2 compose files. There's the compose for real compose for like production, and then there's the developer compose. They're more or less the same. We just add some environment. We added one environment variable and a volume so that we could mount that code across. So let's go back. I'm going to drop out of this container. And one of the nice things about VS Code is it tells you in this sort of top bar here where you are. So I am in the container called Flask Web. It's actually Flask Web 1 because it's composed, so it could scale this if it wanted to. and I'm inside of that. So then I can exit out of that, and now I'm in the Flask app in WSL2, which is where my code lives. So let's just look at these real quick. I'm gonna actually pull this back out because for production, I don't need this. And actually, for production, I wouldn't do this either. I would do Metcalf C, which is my username on Hub, and I would do Metcalf C Flask. It's not a build. This would be an image. So let's go ahead and do that. So now, and we're going to update this to 3.8 as well. So now we've started to move towards like, okay, now I've got real production and I've got developer. And if I could look at my compose dev, I do want it to build out of the app directory. I do want the development environment variable set, and I want to mount across the code directory so I can quickly iterate and make changes. And everything else is the same. It's still port 5000. Well, that's pretty cool. So what else could we do to make this better? Well, let's go look at the app itself, and let's look at the Docker file. So it's a pretty simple Docker file from Python. We have a working directory, which just means this is where all commands from now on get run. Copy the requirements across to app, then pip install the requirements. The reason that we're doing this is to take advantage of Docker's caching features. Then copy the code, and you do requirements first, because if the requirements text doesn't change, you'll skip the pip install and you'll just go to the code. So as long as code changes, that's it. And then there's some entry points and some commands. This is a great start, but stage builds, I think we could do this better, and we could do something like build, which is something I'd like to see. I'm writing a PR for Awesome Compose to have an entire testing framework so that we can test all of the compose pieces, and I'm working with some folks at Docker to get that in, so that as the community makes changes and make sure that Awesome Compose examples are always working. So let's go ahead and add some tests to this simple Flask app. And to do that, as opposed to trying to figure out other ways of like, do I need to make another image to hold the tests, or should I test locally? Let's do it all in the container. And the way I'd like to do that is by making this a multi-stage build. So I'm going to I'm gonna look at some notes while I do this. So I'm going to say from Alpine, and this is going to be as base, which, sorry, I mean, this needs to be as base. So multi-stage builds, if you're not familiar, we are going to basically make an alias for this image, the step of this image. It's going to be called base, and we're going to do some work in it. We're going to do the workdir. We're going to copy the requirements because everybody will need the requirements, and we're going to pip install them because everybody will need those steps for what comes next. So now we're actually going to add a couple of spaces here just to bring these commands down. So let's keep everything working, but just show what's happening. So now I'm going to do from base as prod. Copy the app and set up these entry point commands. So what this would be is Um, I'm going to create one image with 3 layers that has the base, and that's the base image. From that base image, I'm going to add some code, and I'm going to add some entry points and some commands. So now, officially in my build, I will have 2 images, but I will really only have, it'll result in the same thing. I'm going to have a production image. So now let's go see what we need to do to make this happen. And this is going to get confusing. So there's going to be a lot of commands. I'm going to have to retype them. So I'm going to bring in one of my favorite tools, which is I'm going to bring in some make files to make it so that we can just automate some of this stuff. So let's test this first. We're just going to do Docker. Before we test it, multi-stage build, we're going to do export Docker.
Oh no. I think we might have lost Chad. The internet is fun. Oh, here he is calling back. Oh, hey, Chad. We're just doing a live stream here.
I know.
How are you?
Good. Here, it would appear that Control R, if you've got Skype up, will drop your call. I'm over here trying to type here, and I'm instead dropping my call. So,
no problem. Let's go back.
No big deal. Let me grab you and pull you off.
Get me out of the way there. Yeah, cool. You came back fast. So
all right.
We should have just acted like it was planned.
My internet is better today than it has been recently, so let's knock on wood that it stays that way.
Awesome.
So I'm going to do export Docker BuildKit. So, and I need this to the multi-stage build B, at least the way I want to set up multi-stage build. So for those of you who aren't familiar with BuildKit, BuildKit is a project that we've been working on for a while now that is sort of a rethinking of Docker build. Do this, and if I do Docker build, let's see, Docker build. If I do Docker build of this, you'll notice that the build experience looks a little different. The text that gets outputted looks a little different. Some of the flow is a little bit different. The end result is the same. So let's just kind of walk through this real quick. We more or less did the same pieces and parts. We copied all of the context, which is everything that the Docker file needs to do what it's going to do, into an image, and then did the image. You'll see that we did base, which has 4 steps, and prod, which has an additional step. And so it built all of that, and then at the end spit out a single image with a SHA. And I didn't tag it, so it just spit out the SHA. And that's a pretty easy way for us to make that multi-stage build, and now it's the exact same build. It's just now it's in 2 stages. So let's keep refining that a bit and see what else we can do. I'm going to make a makefile though, which is going to include some of this stuff so I don't have to keep typing it. So I started as a C programmer a long time ago, and I just got really used to writing makefiles. Not everybody likes them, and not everybody wants to write them, but I find that they are really useful. So I'm going to tell Compose to use the CLI to build. So Compose can do its own sort of magic for build, and I don't want it to do that. I want it to use the CLI so that it'll use BuildKit, and I'm going to do Docker Compose build. Actually, let's change this to build. And
So Chad, real quick. So when you set that environment variable right before you call compose, because usually Docker Compose will make its own calls, right, to build. But what you're doing there is telling it, hey, you're great, Compose, but we want to use the engine. So just like the CLI uses the engine, use the engine also. Is that? Yeah.
Yeah, effectively, hey, Compose, I love what you do, but in this case, for build, just shell out to the CLI effectively and let the CLI and the overrides that I've set for the CLI handle build, please. Yeah. So at the top of this, I'm going to export that BuildKit so that BuildKit's always there, and I'm going to put this part in here. Now let's go see what happens when we do build for this. So now if I do make build, it's got an image. Oh, sorry. I need to compose, and we are compose dev. Yeah, sure. So why did that happen? Because it's not in this directory. It is in this directory. What did I do wrong? Oh, so I wish that there was a better convention for YAML besides some people use A and some people don't, because I always use A, and I think most of the Compose examples don't. And so now Compose basically did. Somebody asked a question earlier about why Compose over build scripts or even makefiles. You could do all of this stuff with makefiles. You know, a lot of people use Compose to sort of remember all of the different flags. So in this case, this is a single container. You don't really need to use Compose. You could do it all with Docker runs, except that you would, one, have to type really long Docker runs, and two, you'd have to remember all the flags and get them right, and which ones go where, and is it $pwd/app? Is that what I want to put into /app? And all of that just becomes really tedious. And Compose becomes a very simple way to define, this is what my application looks like. And normally it's, this is what my application looks like, and A talks to B, and B talks to C, and C talks to the database. But lots of people use it for build and test automation. So
yeah.
Now we have basically the same thing that we used to have.
And super easy to share. Like if I get your...
Super easy to share. Yeah, 100%. So let's get a dev target, and I don't need this anymore.
It's fun watching you do this VI magic.
Yeah,
it's all magic to me.
I use both. I use a little bit of code for longer term, and I use like longer sessions, and I use VI if I'm just making quick changes. So now let's do make dev. So we've got debug mode on, and if I go find this and I reload this, it should be, okay, how's it going? If I pull up, let's see, where am I? I'm in the Flask directory. So if I do code in here, I'm going to go to the app and go to this. Pull this up. We'll drop this back out and make another change. And now go find this. And now we have the exact same thing we had before, except we have the first step of a multi-stage build, which is
nice.
I think pretty slick. And now we can do, this is all like refactoring, right? It's like, okay, I want to do something, but to do it, I need to get a step in between. And all of this work that I just did was because I actually want to get to a point where I can use a unit test. So I want to put tests in here. And the way I would like to do that is to just use the same Docker file and not have to do like a separate Docker file or not have to do like local tests. I'd like to do it all in one big piece. Let's go to, let's see, how I want to do this. Let's open the Docker file. So we copied in the app. We're going to say base as, I'm going to call this source. So now from base as source, we're going to add the source. From source.
I love the IntelliSense in Visual Studio.
Yeah. Sometimes it's really helpful. Sometimes it's less. But it does work. Right? So this is it's smart enough to know that there are lots of images out there, but those aren't the ones I want to use.
Works pretty nice.
So from source
in my compose file, I was just using it the other day. I was like, oh, there it is. Cool. I was using some archaic property in the compose file, and I forgot what it was, and it popped up for me. Made it nice, but yeah, I've not 100%, but good is good enough, I think.
Well, I think the doc this is again the Docker extensions taking care of all this for you. So you could just highlight one of the reserved words and see the docs for it. So like, what is that? What does entry point look like? Oh, right, it looks like this.
Yeah.
Or which goes first in copy? Is it the thing I want, or sort of like I can never remember how to make a symbolic link. I continuously will have the man page every single time I do it. The other thing that's nice is like on the initial it'll do completion from hub. So if you know that you want Python but you don't remember the exact tag, you can do from Python and then colon, and then it'll pre-populate a bunch of tags for you, and you can say like, oh right, I want 3.7. So I think that's cool.
Yeah.
So I just added a new multi-stage, and that's the source stage. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to be clever. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. About how we build this to take maximum efficiency from the cache that we're about to do. And now this is where it's going to start to diverge. I'm going to say from source as test. Come on now, don't do this to me. And from source as prod. And so now our Docker file has come to a fork in the woods. We are going to have a set of things that can go the test directory, and we're going to have a set of things that can go the prod way, and those are going to be different things. So I'm going to even have so far as to say like I'm going to have different entry in these things. The command for this is going to be run Python test, and the command for this is going to be run. And so my test will run this, and my prod will run that, and we'll see what happens. So now let's do There's an interesting thing though here is does Compose know which of these is actually the application? So I think by default it uses the last one, but there is an easier way to do this, which is I'm going to say that I'm going to build, and the target is going to be prod. And that means in a multi-stage build, the thing I want to run is prod. So let's go try this and see if it works. So we're going to do make build. Oops, hold on a second. What did I do? I did something I didn't. Okay, I know what I did. So compose, this is actually context.
Ah, good catch.
Target prod. So what I'm actually doing is now I'm making this a pretty special thing. I'm saying when you build this, you're going to find the context for it in this directory, and the target of the multi-stage build is going to be prod. So now let's go see if that works.
You might not have saved your Docker file there. Did you? Do you need to do that?
Let's do it just in case.
Okay.
I think I saved it, but
there we go. Same. Same.
Okay, so now one of the things that's really interesting here is you'll notice that it started from a base. It had some cache. It hit some caches. So these things haven't changed. The working dir didn't change. The requirements text didn't change. The pip didn't change. The source code did. And now it has a new app. But you'll notice it didn't do anything about test because that wasn't part of the graph. So when BuildKit figures out what you want to do, it actually draws and this is where my understanding on BuildKit is going to get real light. It figures out the plan as it goes through the Docker file and figures out, okay, so everybody needs base, everybody needs source, but test does not need prod, and prod doesn't need test. And so it draws that graph. And then when it goes to do the plan, it builds the graph. And it's pretty smart about, you can do parallel builds. If two stages are independent, it can do parallel builds. It's really smart. It's really slick. And then it can also, it knows from that, like who shares and doesn't share caches. And you can do some pretty cool things with BuildKit. There are some really neat, I think DockerCon talks that you can go look at if you want to learn more about like all the really cool things you can do. But now we're back to what we had, except now we also have a test component, and we want to figure out how to use that. So let's go get test. So I'm just copying some notes so that we can do.
Quick question here, Chad. So
go for it.
So Mohit was asking, do you always have to copy in source if you already have the binary? I think that's what he's asking. Yeah, if you have the binary, go ahead and just copy it in to the image if you're going to use that, right? Just copy it in. But if you're using like language that's compiled as opposed to like JavaScript or Python, typically, copy your source code in and then compile inside of your image. You have in your Docker file, you can set up all your dependencies to do all that inside of the image and build inside your image. And this is where Chad is really showing the benefits of multi-stage, right? So you could do that all in that base part of your Docker file. So building, compiling, all your tools are in that image. And then your second image, you just pull that binary out and it will keep your image a lot smaller.
Yep, 100%.
I think I'll grab where you're doing that. I'll grab one of our dev managers wrote a really good blog post on setting up your Go environment, and he does a lot of that. So I'll post that in the chat. It might be a good read for you. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
And let's just show what that might look like.
Awesome.
So let's say in one of my previous images, or sorry, previous stages, I have a file that I want to get. I can do copy, and now copy source test, right? But it also, and this is where like the magic of like the Docker extension comes in. Like it also shows you that there's these two other options, and one of them is from, right? So I can do from the stage. I could say like let's just say source. There's a file in there, and now from that pull something out, and you could do something like app py, right? Like if this was or like let's app compile, right?
Yeah.
You could just grab it, and what that means is everything else gets left behind. So if you've got a couple hundred megs of source code with a bunch of random stuff, because like the Git repository has all this history and that all gets copied in and it gets really large, but your statically compiled binary is 5 megs, then you can just copy down the binary and you can be done, and you can just toss the rest. It's also great because the safest container is something that just has the application and its dependencies. And if it has no dependencies, then just that static binary is basically as safe as you can get, right? So there is no shell for an attacker to get onto. There is no other applications that could be exploited. Like it's just that thing. There's nowhere to go. There's no CAs potentially to mess with. It's pretty slick about making that container, 1, small, and 2, safe. But let's go, and we want to do the test. So I'm going to save this, and I added a new rule in the makefile. And what this is Docker build target equals test progress plane. So progress plane just means like I expect that my unit test framework is going to spit out some text, and my CI framework or I might care about the formatting of that text. So Docker, don't try to like stream it to me or do anything, because you'll probably mess it up. Just dump it. And now it's going to ask for a Docker file, and that Docker file isn't in dot. It's actually in. So now if I do test, that's done. And so, I guess what I could do here, and this is probably instead of, let's go back to this. Instead of this, we're actually going to do just this. We're going to do run Python 3 PyTest. And this is going to fail because I don't have PyTest installed. Or I do have PyTest installed, but there's no tests, so it fails. But let's go and get those tests. So I've already written the tests, so I'm going to go just copy that test directory. I didn't want it to take forever for me to. But we can look at what these tests look like. So there is a pretty simple setup. This is the conf test setup for PyTest. We're not going to go too much into this. It's just how you test this is a very simple way to get a fixture for testing Flask apps. There's lots of really great blog posts and documentation on Flask's website for how to do this. But this is the test that we actually care about. So we're going to set up those fixtures. We're going to run a test. We're going to get the root, make sure that the status code was 200, and we want to make sure that the world. So all the changes that I've made would break the test, but we're gonna go see how that would work now. Oh, but there's one more piece, right? I do need to install PyTest. So I'm going to go to the requirements. So pip will now go Flask. And so Dockerfile, I've got PyTest, requirements has got that. I think I'm good to go. So now we're going to do I'll do make test. And what you'll see is actually that it's going to reinstall PyFlask. It's going to reinstall pip because I added a new dependency. And the test is going to fail because it's hello Chad, not hello world. So we're pretty close. Let's go fix that by going to the app and putting it back to world and running the test again. Oops. I forgot to save it. Sometimes do that. Yes. Please save it for me. Now let's try it. All right, so now the test passed. So now we've added unit testing, and we have a way that we can have our tests in the same space using the same code with the same tools, and we didn't have to make 2 Docker files, and we don't have to do much. We can, if you look at this makefile, this is a pretty easy thing to encode into your CI system, like make test, right? And it just is going to work, and you'll see what happens. So is there any other optimizations we can do here? And the answer is yes. I'm going to do a quick one. I'm going to go into the app directory. I'm going to copy requirements text to requirements dev. So I do need Flask. I don't need PyTest for production. I do need PyTest for development. So I'm going to take advantage of the fact that we have a nice multi-stage build to only install the test framework in the stage that needs it. So this is another place where you can do things like you can keep your images smaller, because if you need something for your dev environment, but you don't need it for test, or you need it for test, but you don't need it for dev, and you don't need any of that stuff for prod, you can have multi-stage builds that just take care of all of this stuff for you. So let's just test this again and see what happens. So we're going to do make test. Oops. So we're going to do the requirements again, and then we're going to do requirements for dev, and then test works. And so now if we do build for the other side, and we do go to port 5000, it all just works. So what did we do? Let's do a quick review the best way. Let's see what we did. So we modified the Docker file, and we modified the compose file. We added a makefile. We added a requirements dev so that we can separate our dev requirements from our prod requirements. We added a test directory, compose dev. And so if we go look at those things, it wasn't actually that much, right? So the Docker file changed, probably looks like a dozen lines or so, but that's mostly just separating things out into their own stage. And so a lot of that is just the stage pieces, but notionally it's very similar. And okay, so we changed the compose file. I just changed it from a build to an image because in production, I'm not going to build locally for production. I'm going to pull from a Hub repository. By the way, if you haven't signed up for Hub yet, go to Hub and sign up. And if we look at these new files that I added, we added a test directory. We added this requirements. We added a compose dev so that we could get this Flask. We could change this, add this context, and add a volume so we could get that fast loop. And then I added a makefile just to make it easier to type these things. And all of those things together, in this last hour, we added unit tests, we added multi-stage builds, and a fast inner loop Docker file. Just showing the power of like how fast you can iterate in a compose environment. So if there's other questions, let me know. Otherwise, I think we're more or less up against it.
Yeah, awesome. We had some good chatter going on. Some of the guys and gals in the chat have been giving talks at their work to their colleagues, showing them how to use VS Code in containers. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's use the tool that makes sense for you and the place that it makes sense for, and I think that's great. We work really closely with the VS Code folks, so I every day I find something new in the Docker extension. It's pretty exciting. But yeah.
Well, check out the. Let me drop the. I'll drop the awesome code link in the chat again. Go check it out there. Find your language and platform that you're using, framework, I should say. So there's. Chad showed it earlier, but there's a bunch of stuff in there. If you're using something that's not in the awesome compose, add it. Fork the repo, cut a PR. Our team will take a look at it, and merge it in. Also, too, if you see something in one of the your current language and framework that's in there, and you want to change something, see how something can be done better, add to it. Please do. Right, this is community led. We want this to be the place where you can come and get a good. My term for the week, Chad, is canonical. Not 100% sure what that means, but this is the place where you can get your canonical awesome compose files for your language and framework.
Yeah, it's sort of the it's like the reference, like the Bible.
Yeah, yeah. And Chad and I have been talking. We're gonna try and use Awesome Compose as much as possible. Build a lot of our sample apps and our demos around Awesome Compose. So it's a good place to take a look at. Enter issues, pull requests. Even if you just have questions, put them in the issues, and we'll monitor them and hopefully can answer for you. Yeah. Awesome.
And thank you very much, folks, for coming. Go sign up for a Hub account. Grab Docker Desktop. We didn't show any of the new. We didn't have time for some of the new cloud stuff, but we'll do it. We'll have a bunch of these things coming up. Go grab the new Desktop Edge, which has the latest versions of both the Amazon ECS integration and the Microsoft Azure ACI integration. Look at our channel for some previous videos on that, and we'll have more coming up soon. But thank you very much for coming today.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Talk to you later, Chad. See you guys.